What's up everyone, and welcome back to another skillcapped tier list. 11.5 has some pretty massive changes in store that will shake up the meta a considerable amount. Nerfs to OP picks like Seraphine and Udyr are set to drop, along with some pretty huge buffs to Qiyana. So with the help of our challenger players and using the most up-to-date stats, we are going to bring you all the info on what's going down. To catch our mid-patch update tier list, where we fill you in on any new trends that emerge throughout the patch, head on over to our new meta channel and drop a sub. Link will be in the description below. And just before we get started, let us know down in the comments which champion you think is in need of a buff the most. Alright, let's run it. First, let's run down the item changes and discuss which champions you should expect to become stronger or weaker. Black Cleaver will have its cost decreased from 3,300 down to 3,100. Health of the item will be increased from 300 up to 400. The Butcher passive, where you would gain 5% missing health damage on fully carved opponents, is being removed. Taking its place will be a new passive called Rage. Rage will grant you 5 bonus movement speed per stack of carve when dealing physical damage to your opponent. All in all, these changes will result as net buffs. However, it's hard to say how impactful they will really be. Cleaver has been a very weak item compared to many other options in Season 11, and only a select few champs have been running it. Expect Riven to be a big winner from these buffs alongside Urgot and Pantheon. Next item change is a lot less complicated, as we have Maw receiving a 300 gold reduction. The cost will be decreased from 3,100 down to 2,800 gold. Now, keep in mind that this is indeed Maw and not Hexdrinker. In the past, we've seen many AD champions just sit on a Hexdrinker against heavy AP burst comps, but rarely fully upgrade it to Maw unless the game reached very late. This may now put more of an incentive on completing that Hexdrinker into Maw. As a result of this change, along with those Verdant Barrier buffs from a few patches back, it seems like Riot continues to try and find ways of limiting the amount of burst in the game, more specifically AP burst. This now means that running full AP compositions are way more risky, and making sure you have a good mix of damage is more important. To make the Serpent's Fang passive more consistent, Riot will be issuing a mini rework to the item. Instead of attacks and spells dealing extra damage to shielded targets, you'll now reduce any shields the enemy gains by 50%, and if the target is already shielded, then it will be reduced by 50% as well. Ranged champions will see lesser benefits to this shield busting, as they will only reduce shields by 25%. Serpents will still remain a niche pickup, as you wouldn't want to grab it if the enemy team has no shielding, but in the right situations, it will be a little stronger. Stridebreaker has started to become the best mythic on not only Darius and Garen, but many other bruisers after the Goredrinker nerfs. As a result, Riot will be adjusting the item for 11.5. The dash distance from the active is being increased from 200 up to 300. Slow is going down from 60 to 40%, and the damage from 100% total AD to 75% total AD. The slow, dash, and low cooldown of Stridebreaker active are really what makes it such an attractive pickup, not so much the damage. Even though the damage and slow are being decreased a little, this shouldn't cause the champions who buy it to become much weaker at all. The fact that dash range is being increased could actually outweigh the effects of the slow and damage nerf, and end up being a net positive change in many situations. Overall, our analysts believe Stridebreaker will still remain a great pickup, and at the very worst, would only become slightly weaker. And then the final item change we have is to Muramana. Instead of the passive shock damage dealing 2.5% max mana damage for both abilities and autos, it will now deal a different amount for each. Auto attacks will now deal 1.5% max mana damage, down from the 2.5%. Abilities, on the other hand, will see an increase in damage, going from 2.5% up to 3.5 for melee and 2.7 for ranged. All in all, this is a bit of a power shift in the item, as abilities will now be dealing more damage, whereas autos will deal less. With all the item changes out of the way, let's head on up to the top lane and break down all the changes. First up, we have Jax. His AD per level is increased by 0.87, going from 3.38 up to 4.25. This is definitely bigger than it may seem on paper, as Jax will now have an extra 10 AD for his mid-game spike at around level 11 and 12. Since a longsword gives you 10 AD and is worth 350 gold, you're actually getting some pretty good gold value from this buff. Our analysts believe this will be enough to propel Jax out of B tier and into A for 11.5. And then the only other change directed towards top lane is to Gragas. The mana cost on Gragas Q will be increased from 60 scaling to 80 all the way up to 80 at all ranks. This is definitely a pretty massive hit to top lane Gragas' early bully power, as 20 extra mana on a spell you can use for poke off cooldown will be sure to add up throughout the course of the lane. With this nerf, the fat man will be sinking from A tier down to B for 11.5. Alright, if we have a look at our complete top lane tier list, OP picks of the patch will remain stable, with Garen, Cho'Gath, Darius, and Malphite. Even with those Stridebreaker changes, our analysts don't see Darius or Garen dropping at all. Riven is definitely a pick to watch out for in 11.5 due to Black Cleaver buffs. If all goes well, there's a good chance Riven could find herself in OP tier very soon. If you guys missed our mid-patch update tier list, which was over on our new meta channel, we already moved Fiora up to S tier as she's been seeing way more success due to the new Korean build combined with the buff she got last patch. The best low elo picks to abuse continue to be Cho'Gath, Garen, and Nasus. A few picks you should put at the top of your ban list for 11.5 are Darius, Malphite, and Garen. Shifting our focus over to jungle now, let's start off with the champs receiving buffs. Master Yi will have his E on hit damage increased from 18 scaling to 50 up to 20 scaling to 60. 10 extra damage at max rank is a nice little buff, but our analyst doesn't believe it will be drastic enough to move Yi very far up in priority. You have to keep in mind, Yi was hit harder than most junglers last patch due to his reliance on farming, which doesn't leave him in the best spot. The Wuju Bladesman will remain in our B tier for 11.5. Sejuani is the second jungler who will be buffed, as her W2 max health damage is going from 5.25 up to 6%. Sej has been really close to breaking through into A tier over the past couple of patches, so this change will definitely give her the push she needed. It seems like every second patch as of recent, Trundle is getting some sort of small buff. This trend continues for 11.5, as the Troll King's Q cooldown is being decreased from 4 to 3.5 seconds. For many cooldowns, a 0.5 second decrease wouldn't mean much. Considering Trundle's Q CD is already so short though, 0.5 seconds off is bigger than most people would think. Like Sejuani, this buff will nudge Trundle from B tier into A. Next up, Udyr will be receiving his first decent-sized nerf after stomping the meta the last few patches. Health per level is going down from 99 to 92. On top of this, Udyr's R total aura damage is being lowered from 50 scaling to 275 down to 40 scaling to 240. The last time Udyr was nerfed, 35 damage was taken off his R, and it didn't nudge his power level at all. With another 35 damage being taken off, we do expect him to feel the effects a little more, and combined with the base health nerf, he will fall a bit in power. You do have to keep in mind though, Udyr has held a 54.5% win rate over the last patch, so even with these nerfs, the furthest our analysts expect him to fall would be S tier. For now, Udyr will remain OP, but if things unravel differently than we anticipate throughout the patch, we may have to adjust his placement in our mid-patch update. The last direct jungle change we have for 11.5 is to the Armadillo. Rammus will have a good chunk of his beefiness sliced this patch, as his health per level is being decreased from 95 down to 80. This equates to 150 less health at level 10, which is the equivalent of 400 gold. Pretty sizable nerf overall, and as a result, we'll see Rammus drop from S to A. Now, for the full jungle tier list, Elise, Udyr, Hecarim, and Kha'Zix will each lock down a spot in the OP tier. Elise was bumped up in our 11.4 mid-patch update tier list, as she's been rising above other junglers after the changes from last patch. Ivern and Nunu are really being slept on at the moment, so if you're looking for a strong and underrated champ to pick up, either one could fit the bill. The best low elo picks for jungle include Mundo, Rammus, and Udyr. On top of your ban list for 11.5 should be Udyr, Viego, and Hecarim. Just a couple changes for mid lanes, starting off with Qiyana. W on hit damage is being increased from 8 scaling to 40 up to 8 scaling to 64. W movement speed is up as well, going from 5 scaling to 10% to now 5 scaling to 13%. And then the third buff is to her ultimate, as the damage will be increased from 100 scaling to 240 up to 100 scaling to 300. Qiyana hasn't really been in that bad of a spot compared to some other mid laners, so it's a bit surprising to see her buffed so much. All these changes combined will propel Qiyana up into S tier. We really feel for all those solo queue Azir players out there because you guys get punished way too much due to pro play. Azir will be nerfed for 11.5 as his W soldier damage is being decreased by 10 at all ranks. This will force us to move Azir from C down into the garbage can, where he will be accompanied by Akali. So for the complete mid lane tier list, we have Kassadin, Anivia, Fizz, and Galio as the best carry picks of the patch. Cass was moved up in our mid-patch update as the Everfrost buffs have been treating him very well. Even though Karma is more traditionally played as a support, she's receiving a buff to her Q this patch, which will allow us to bump her from C into B for mid. With Cass jumping up in priority, a really underrated counter pick on the rise has been Tristana. We've seen Triss pulled out a decent amount in pro play recently and can do very well into meta picks like Cass, Yone, and Katarina. Our recommended low elo picks for mid lane consist of Anivia, Malzahar, and Annie. On the chopping block should be Fizz, Yone, and Kassadin. Heading down to the bot lane now, we have 4 champion changes. First up is Samira. Instead of leaving Samira in the gutter, Riot will be buffing her right back up a little for 11.5. Samira's AD per level will be increased from 2.3 to 3, and her Q damage ratio is going up from 80 scaling to 110% to now 80 scaling to 120%. This will help push her back into viability, but won't shoot her up the tier list very far. We will be moving Samira out of C and into B for 11.5. One of the most forgotten ADCs in Season 11 has been Kog'Maw, so Riot will be buffing him slightly to inform people the champion still exists. Kog's W max HP damage will be increased from 3 scaling to 6% up to 3 scaling to 7%. Not the craziest change in the world, but considering Kog has been hovering right around the 50% mark the past few patches, we are confident in moving him up from B into A. And then a few nerfs to Senna are in order, as her passive will no longer grant over 100% crit chance. Rage Blade's crit to on-hit conversion will now be capped at 100%. The third change will see Rage Blade's on-hit damage now be affected by champion crit damage modifiers. These changes will make Rage Blade's synergy with Senna less insane, and in turn lower her power level for 11.5. We still see Senna as a top tier ADC, however, she'll be dropping from OP down to S. Twitch will be receiving a shift in power from AP over to AD. Twitch's passive AP ratio will be lowered down from 3 to 2.5%, while his ultimate will be buffed. Our AD is going up by 5 per rank. Our duration will be increased from 5 to 6 seconds. Despite Twitch being a less popular ADC, he's quietly been performing very well the last few patches. The AD Twitch build of Kraken into Hurricane and Infinity Edge is actually winning more than the most popular AP setup, so we wouldn't be surprised if Twitch really pops off this patch. Our analysts believe he has the chance to make it into S tier, however, for now, Twitch will remain in A, and we will keep you updated in our mid-patch update tier list. Now, having a look at our ADC tier list, OP will include Jinx, Vayne, Jhin, Swain, and Seraphine. We moved Jinx up into OP during our mid-patch update in 11.4, as she's been absolutely dominating after the recent base HP buff, along with her Q and E buffs 2 patches back. There's honestly a ton of great ADCs to choose from right now, guys, as many of them have been buffed the last few patches. Caitlyn is back in a great spot, Kai'Sa is still amazing even after her nerfs. The only ADCs we'd recommend shying away from at the moment are Xayah and Aphelios. The top 3 low elo picks for ADC are Misfortune, Jinx, and Sivir. The best picks to slice from the Rift include Kai'Sa, Jhin, and Jinx. Support in 11.5 sees a lot of really great changes that will balance the rollout nicely. Let's first start by breaking down the champion buffs, taking a look at Karma. Karma's Q cooldown will be decreased by 1 second at all ranks. Considering this spell can be used for poke off cooldown, 1 second off is bigger than you may think. Our analysts believe this change will finally put Karma in a good spot for solo queue, as she'll be moving out of B tier and into A. Pyke is the second support who's a recipient of some buffs. Passive Great Health Storage has been changed from 25 scaling to 50% to now 10% plus 25% lethality, increased to 35% plus 50% lethality when 2 or more enemies are nearby. So because that was quite the mouthful, what do these changes actually mean? It's a net positive change for support Pyke in most scenarios, whereas it will end up being a nerf to solo lane Pyke. Like Karma, Pyke will be shifting out of B tier up into A for 11.5. Seraphine is being hit once again, this time with some sizable nerfs. Sarah's passive ally note damage will be decreased from 100 down to 25%. Passive note decay after the first has been removed. Seraphine's ultimate cooldown will be increased by 20 seconds at rank 1, which will limit her windows for playmaking. Lastly, her passive note damage is being increased from 4 scaling to 16 up to 4 scaling to 24. All changes considered, our analysts see Seraphine finally dropping out of OP tier. She won't be falling far at all though, as Seraphine will be placed in S and remain a top tier support, just not as broken as before. Another OP pick from 11.4 in Rell is being nerfed as well. Rell's base armor will be reduced from 35 down to 32, and her W cooldown increased from 11 to 13 seconds. Despite both these nerfs, Rell should still hold strong and continue to dominate in 11.5. We're dropping her out of OP tier, but as we did with Seraphine, Rell will only be falling as far as S. To much of our surprise, Shaco support is an odd one being targeted by Riot. We've had Shaco in our S tier for a while, but we weren't really expecting nerfs due to his lower play rate. Nonetheless, W AoE damage will be lowered from 15 scaling to 35, down to 10 scaling to 30. W single target damage is going down from 35 scaling to 95 to now 25 scaling to 85. To ensure jungle Shaco isn't affected as much, his W will now deal 10 scaling to 50 extra damage to monsters. Since so much of Shaco's support's power comes from his boxes, these nerfs will hit him a decent amount. As a result, we'll be moving Shaco down one tier from S into A. Taking a look at our support tier list now, the role is becoming a lot more balanced in 11.5. We still have Thresh and Leona in OP tier. However, there are a plethora of really amazing S tier supports that you can see great success with. As Pyke and Karma move up while Seraphine and Rell drop down, it really helps to close the gap between each champion's power level. Our 3 recommended low elo picks for support are Swain, Maokai, and Leona. Get rid of Leona, Thresh, or Rell if you're unsure of who to ban. So that concludes our entire breakdown of the 11.5 meta to ensure that you can start dominating as soon as the patch drops. Don't forget to head on over to our new meta channel so you can stay up to date with all the new trends and catch our mid-patch update tier list. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Good luck in 11.5, and we'll see y'all next time.